Hello, this is Deadly Jedley, and welcome to the Deadly Dialogues Part 5. Had a great day at work today. It was busy all day making electrical cables, which is part of my job where I work at Welby Garden Centre for Challenge Southern Highlands in the village of Welby, New South Wales, Australia. In the Southern Highlands region, that is. Now, what I'm going to say next it might sound a bit crazy, but it's real, it's true. Because right at the end of the day, I had this sudden realization. I think a song came on the radio that made me think of it. But I thought, I'm not searching for my female soulmate. Because I am looking for a female soulmate, but I'm not. I'm not looking or searching for my female soulmate. Instead, I know that somewhere out there, she's searching for me. She's looking for me, right? Maybe she's already met me. Maybe she's watching this video. So if that's the case, I'd like to talk to my soulmate for a bit. So the beauty about being soulmates to me, and this is kind of to do with the universe and everything, is that it's a much stronger connection than just being in a relationship or even being married, right? I think being soulmates is a whole different level. It's a whole different kettle of fish, right? And it's a good thing, it's kind of hard to explain, but I think my soulmate is out there looking for me, and she might have found me, or she's close to finding me, or she's realizing at the same time I am that we're soulmates. So it's like our connection will only grow stronger and stronger as time goes on. I'm sure we might get married, do that formalization thing if you want to, or she might not want to do that. She might just want to be soulmates with me and have kids and do all those things, because I think the other thing about when you're soulmates with someone is that things like work and money aren't an issue. They're not a concern. We'll always have work, we'll always have money to have the things in our life that we want to have, like kids and holidays and a house and cars and all that sort of stuff. We won't have to worry about how to make ends meet, because that's soulmates, right? That's what it is. I always end my day with a coffee. It's the way I start it, right? Or I start the night with a coffee the way I end the day, or however you want to look at it, right? So what else did I think of today? A Beatles classic song came on the radio today, Something by George Harrison. And it's one of my favourite Beatles songs, and it made me think of the time Dad interviewed Paul McCartney, one of the other Beatles. There's John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr. The four main Beatles, right? There are other people who were in the Beatles at the start, Pete Best and Stuart Sutcliffe, but John, Paul, George and Ringo were the four Beatles as we know them popularly, if that's even a word. I think it is. My soulmate might know. So, basically, Dad met Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney. He wasn't a Sir back then, but he's a Sir Paul McCartney now. He was knighted in 1997. Dad met Paul in 1980 when Dad was working as a journalist. Like I would be a journalist years later for the local newspaper, but Dad was a journalist before me, because, he just was. Dad was working for a magazine in London called London Australasian Monthly, I think, or London Australasian Magazine, which was a magazine for all the Aussies and Asians living in London at the time. And Dad got to interview Paul McCartney, and he went round to Macca is Paul McCartney's nickname. Dad went round to Macca's apartment in London and did the interview, and they chatted for like an hour, maybe 2 hours. They might have had a coffee, a cup of tea. And Dad kept on saying to Paul, do you want to talk about the Beatles, yes or no? And Paul would say, oh, F the Beatles. Well, not like that. Like, he would say, oh, it's the effing Beatles again. That's what he meant to say. Because he was that tired, I think, at that period of life of being asked about the Beatles. He sometimes swore like that, Dad said. He said he swore a lot, right? He dropped the F-bomb a few times, but who wouldn't? After being in the Beatles, you kind of entitled to say that if Paul McCartney wanted to. So, he said that, but then he did the interview with Dad. And we still have a copy of the magazine here at home somewhere. We took it up to the Paul McCartney concert 18 months ago in Sydney and tried to get backstage to get Paul to look at it and sign it, but we couldn't get past security, me and Mum. So we've still got that magazine at home as a family heirloom. Dad's interview with Paul McCartney. Now, speaking of celebrities, the other celebrity story that Dad used to say all the time was when he met the actor Mel Gibson. Now, this is a funny story, and the last time I can remember Dad saying it, we were in New York. It would have been April 2006, and Dad was a little bit sick with the first signs of his illness, but he was still 90% healthy, I think. And we were on the holidays, right, in New York City, and we were at a rooftop restaurant with friends of ours, and Dad said this story to everyone at the table. I'd heard it before, but I never got tired of hearing it, right? It is the Paul McCartney, the Mel Gibson, story. Now, it's the same year as 1980 that Dad met Paul McCartney. That Dad was in Sydney later on, and he was at acting school, NIDA. That's the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney, where it is. It's still there to this day. And he met a young Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson was only about 22, fresh off the set of Mad Max, Mel's first big movie. And Dad got to go back to Mel Gibson's apartment, all his apartments, Paul McCartney's apartment, Mel Gibson's apartment. Dad must have seen a lot of inside of celebrities' apartments for a coffee. So Mel Gibson wanted to make Dad a cup of coffee in his apartment in Bondi Beach. So Dad went back to the apartment and Mel Gibson made 2 cups of white coffee. That's coffee with milk, for those who don't know much about coffee, but I think everyone does. Who wouldn't, And Dad then had a white coffee with Mel Gibson, was about to, and then he said, "Sorry, Mel, but I only have black coffee." So Mel Gibson picked up Dad's cup of white coffee, threw it out of the window onto the beach, Bondi Beach far below, and made Dad a fresh cup of black coffee. So there's 2 morals to this little Mel Gibson story. The first moral is that Mel Gibson's a good guy, and he likes white coffee, because he made Dad a fresh cup of black coffee because he wanted it, right? Now, if I was having coffee with Mel Gibson, I'd be happy with a cappuccino. I was going to say flat white, and then thought cappuccino, or anything, or mocha. I'd say, "Mel, where's my mocha, mate? Just have a mocha with Mel Gibson," right? And Dad said the same thing about Mel Gibson. He was a great guy, like Paul McCartney was a great guy. I did the interview, had a coffee with Mel Gibson, and it was good. Now, the third celebrity that Dad used to talk about was Kylie Minogue. Because when Dad was on TV here in Australia in the 1970s as Skeeter the Paperboy, Kylie Minogue would ring up Dad at work and ask to talk to Skeeter, because that was Dad's character name. And Dad would always say, "Hello, Kylie, it's great to hear from you, but I'm very busy. I'll have to talk to you later. Goodbye." And Kylie Minogue would have been about 10 years old at the time, ringing up one of her heroes on TV, I think, before she became famous. Because I think Kylie became famous. Actually, I've just seen on X, recently, she's on tour, and she's only 56 still, because she became famous very young. She was like 17 or something, and that was that puts her at 39 years ago or something. That's like the early 1986. She was on Neighbours, I think, in 1988. She might have been about 19 or something. But anyway, Kylie Minogue became famous quite young, a bit like Britney Spears did, and so they're still really young. But you're never old, are you? You're only as old as you think you are. Age is but a number, and you can have fun with numbers, so it's fun to get older, right? Because the older you get, the more you know about numbers. I'm about to turn 38. And I've never loved life so much. I think life gets better the older you get. I'm not just saying that as a man, thinking, well, men have it easier as they age, because I don't think that's true. I think it all depends on how you look at it. Women and men are 2 different types of personality, I think. Although, with the way the world's going, the lines are getting blurred all the time, aren't they? With all sorts of different people in the world. I won't go any more into it than that. But I will say that, in my opinion, someone like J.K. Rowling on X, where she posts things about transgenders not being legitimate or something, I think that's what she always gets into trouble for. I kind of don't want to get into this debate, but it can be a pretty tricky topic to get stuck into, isn't it? Who's to say a transgender person isn't the sex they turned into, or they're still the sex they were, or how do they identify? It's all up in the air. And that's not just a great George Clooney movie, which I saw years ago, which I saw on a laptop when I was in the plane in the air. So I saw Up in the Air when I was up in the air. I really did. And Up in the Air, I won't spoil it too much. I'll tell you a little bit about what it's about. It's about a guy whose job it is to fire people, and he's in the airport or something, and he has to fly around on airplanes. Then he loses his job, I think. I can't remember. It's a George Clooney movie. So, maybe my soulmate and I one day will sit down and watch it together. If you're watching, why don't we do that? And have a coffee. Speaking of coffee, this is really delicious coffee. I don't know if you can see it. I won't spill it. But no, you can't see it. And if I tilt the mug too far, it'll spill. It's one of those instant sachet cappuccino type ones. Because at work I drink straight black coffee, because that's all we've really got in the kitchen. And yeah. So what else was on my mind? I think that's about it. I might make this video, I'll try and talk for another few minutes to make it close to 15 again. I'll try and aim for 15 minutes every video. So if I can just keep talking. There's a Pink Floyd song. That's the other thing Dad did. I'll tell you another story about my dad, right? He would always say that he saw Pink Floyd performing The Wall. That was their big album. It came out like in 1980 as well, I think. Maybe 1979. Live in London in 1980 when Dad was in London. So that makes sense because it would have been around the time he interviewed McCartney. Dad saw Pink Floyd do The Wall. And this is all before John Lennon was shot. Lennon was still alive because Dad said when he met McCartney, Paul said he and John Lennon had patched things up and they were mates again. So they ended on good terms before Lennon's untimely death in New York. So Dad saw The Wall by Pink Floyd and he said Pink Floyd were 3 hours late to get to the show. And they said, we would say sorry for being 3 hours late, but we're not that sort of band, so F you. And then they went and played the show. And that was kind of Dad's experience with Pink Floyd, right? So when I got into Pink Floyd years later, as any 17-year-old guitar player does, I asked Dad about Pink Floyd, and he said, look, they're a huge band, they're a great band, but he never got into them really. And I think I've got a couple of Pink Floyd albums still sitting around somewhere. I mean, who can't listen to Dark Side of the Moon and not feel like you're on another planet? So anyway, and Led Zeppelin, can't forget Led Zeppelin. Beatles, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, they're the three biggest bands ever to come out of England, if you ask me. Then people will say, oh, what about Queen and The Who and all the other bands? There's so many great rock bands. I shouldn't have started talking about this because now I'll sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. But, I think there are many, I'll leave it like this because my time's nearly up. There's many brilliant bands from all over the world in existence, and it's just about finding the one you want to listen to over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Okay, so this is nearly over. I think I've got to talk for one more minute. So I'll say one more fact. So I was listening to the radio at work today and heard something about Sir Donald Bradman's bat from the Ashes, and it reminded me of Dad because Dad was a big fan of Bradman. He wrote books about Don Bradman, helped with the Bradman Museum. We met Bradman himself when he was still alive at his home in Adelaide. I was 9 years old, I'll never forget it. He showed me how to hold a cricket bat. So for those of you into cricket, I met the Don and got a lesson from the Don. So I don't know if you can ever top that, can you? Anyway, this is Deadly Jedley. I'm going to go now. It's been real. I will do another one of these maybe tomorrow, maybe in a few days. I'll see how I feel. Bye.